Welcome to the BXG Podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet.
You think it's just going to be barbecue sauce?
Because if you actually read those books, it's just gobbledygook.
I really think clothes should be mandatory.
Speaking of Star Wars,
Captain America.
trailer reaction video. So a man, Greg Filson, who's had more psychotic episodes than Twin Peaks. Something we've never done before, despite the fact that we're both big fans of the show, we've never done a weekly Ted Lasso before. And so this will be our first time.
That's what she said.
Doing Ted Lasso
That's what she said.
on a weekly basis. Season 3 starts with a little bit longer of an episode, I feel like. I mean,
Yeah, it's a little bit like, and I guess this entire season is a little bit long. Yeah, this entire season's going to be longer. There's even one episode that goes over 50 minutes.
oh,
So
geez. I don't know if I'm ready for all that. But we see...
that's what she said.
We see... well, first of all, I guess, I mean, spoiler-free. For Ted Lasso, I don't know. I mean, do we need to do... Yeah, sure.
It's good.
I mean, what
That's just...
Ted Lasso?
Show's good. Ted Lasso. I mean, it's like one of those shows that, like, I know we're only 3 seasons or whatever, but it's just very reliable.
Sure.
And I don't mean that in, like, a negative sense. I mean this purely as a positive, like, it's a show that hits the notes it's supposed to hit. Now, I've seen different discord on the internet about it. I actually think the discourse on the internet is wrong about it being lazy. I don't think that. I think that's people
Like in general.
the episode.
Okay.
And I actually will say, I guess the semi-spoilers, like, I disagree with that. Because I think there's a certain thing about this show that you have to keep. Otherwise, it's not Ted Lasso.
Sure.
And I think that's what's really important. So for me, this was just a Ted Lasso episode of Ted Lasso. And if you watch it, I guess if you're listening to this, you've watched Ted Lasso, so you understand what that means when I say that. So, yeah, no, I that's what I think. I think it was just a very Ted Lasso episode of Ted Lasso.
Yeah. I don't think there's any way to say anything without getting into the details of this, spoilers.
Good looking mustache.
Yeah. So the episode begins with saying goodbye to his kid. I think the overarching episode or the overarching theme of the episode, which will likely end up being maybe the overarching theme of the season, is like he's like, why am I still doing this? I should be at home with my kid. And I think that's probably going to play into it. Now, I remember at one point Jason Sudeikis had said that he feels like this is a 3-season show. Is that,
Yeah.
Is this the last season?
Well, Apple was not confirming it. He said that this is what he thought the show should be.
Right.
Paraphrasing it, I'm not going to give his full quote, but it's like, this is the story he wants to tell.
Right.
Is this. Now, Apple has a lot of money,
Sure.
so who knows what that actually means, but this is the best show on Apple. And I mean, like, what it does, what this show brings in financially, this is the show that does it for Apple. It's the most successful show on Apple, so they don't want to say it's the last season.
Right.
Jason Sudeikis is iffy about it because he also likes money, I'm sure, like most of us.
Right.
And so he doesn't want to say either, but he says it's the story he wanted to tell.
Yeah.
So
Listen, I'll grow a mustache and talk like a Midwesterner and make crazy analogies if they want to hire me, if they want to recast.
I had a Instagram thing where it's like, you get that thing on Instagram where it's like your history or whatever every once in a while, like every 2 weeks. And then I forgot. It looks like when Janie and I had moved back from Alaska and I was living at her parents' house, where I had like a lush mustache, like the most lush mustache I could have. I'm not someone that grows facial hair well, for whatever reason. Good and bad. It's good not to grow a lot of hair. But I forgot how lush my mustache actually was. And I was like, I should maybe bring that back. It might be something I bring back.
It's not.
I might bring the mustache back. Pre-wedding, I think what I might do is I might just go May to June, pre-wedding, mustache. When I'm fishing in Montana, I may just be fishing in Montana mustache style. Mustache. Yeah, well, anyone, male or female, or non-binary, coming to the wedding, I'm going to Montana, I think, in June, second week of June, and I'm just gonna go fishing for a couple days. That's my bachelor party, because I'm not a big let's party person. I'm a more of let's chill and drink beer. So I'm gonna fish in Montana. Anyone's welcome to come and join me. That's what we're gonna do. But I love the mustache, and this has nothing to do with this episode. But I do like
We're off the wagon.
I do like the episode on. What I say is I really like this episode. And since we're into the spoilers, I thought having this son to start off and like doing the whole thing of like, why am I gonna do this? Why am I doing it? I do think as much as like Ted Lasso's the nice guy, he's still competitive. It's just a different sort of competitiveness. Like he still wants to win. It's not this I need to rip their throats out. It's just I want to defeat them in the fairest way possible. And if it's a 0-0 tie with penalty kicks and the last person kicks it to win, in soccer terms, he's okay with that. I think that's where he's at. And I really, really appreciate that, because I think a lot of people thought this was going to be more of a cutthroat episode because of Nate, or cutthroat season. But we learned a lot about Nate in this. I think we learned a ton about Nate in this episode, which I really, really like. And his turn to the gray hair and everything, which just
When you
fantastic.
When you say we learned a lot about Nate, why don't you elaborate?
I think Nate, who I don't want to use I'm going to say this word, but I don't mean it as angrily. He despised Ted in the moment. But now I'm starting to think he realizes that Ted was doing the best with what he could do, because this was not a great team. This is not Manchester City. Right. This is not Liverpool. And so you have to act differently with the talent you have. And so you have to treat people a certain way to get them to come along to you because of whatever reason. Now, Ted's first season, they get relegated, and then they get taken back into the Premier League, and now everyone's making fun of them being ranked 20th. And, like, he comes with these little jokes, but then he seems so apprehensive, and then his parents are, like, disappointed in him and all these things. And we're talking about Nate here. Nate's not a bad guy. He wants to be somebody, and he doesn't know who he is. And that's that thing where, I think probably a lot of us have been in a position where if we don't know where we're at, someone we have respected, we try to be like for a little while and it doesn't work, so we go the opposite direction. And we think, well, I need to do that because I need to make my own name. And I think that's what he's doing. But there's the whole thing with his car getting taken away, his little Mini Cooper, and he gets this new car, and he just doesn't seem to really like it. And he tries to be funny, and it doesn't work. And then Ted, where he's Ted Lasso, and and all this, and it does work. It doesn't work initially, but Ted just keeps being Ted, and he kind of reminds me of Roy Williams, North Carolina's head coach, where he would never say a bad word. You know, he would say a bad word about anybody, but he would always talk, and he would just use that classic Southern charm. I mean, Roy Williams is as Southern as anything, you know? And it just, it was that thing where he would just keep saying the nicest thing possible, and it didn't matter if he believed it or not. He charmed you enough. And that's what Ted Lasso is, and that's what Nate can't do yet. But my prediction, I don't want to spoil it because I want you to talk about it, but I have a different prediction for Nate. So what did you think, Brent?
I think that this was almost like a case study in how two completely different people deal with imposter syndrome. Where Ted is like, he's like, I know I'm in over my head, but I'm just going to smile and crack jokes and, get through it. And Nate is also, I know I'm in over my head, but I have to, I'm expected to act a certain way because I leaked about his his panic attacks. I'm going to talk shit about him. I'm going to, act like this guy who's like very devil may care, whatever. But then we see him in his moments and he's like, he sees that he tried to be this snarky kind of like, I'm going to talk trash guy. And Ted just one-ups him just by being himself. And he can't live with that. And then the whole car thing, and he's like so embarrassed. He's, oh, that's my car, and it just feels like both of them know they're in way over their head, but Ted is just like, because of who he is just able to get through it. And like Keely says to Rebecca, way to go on just letting Ted be Ted. And I think that, like you said, he's competitive, but it almost is, all of the other stuff is like a smoke screen. And I think the prime example of his competitiveness and how he's been able to successfully use his just generally like very polite, very charming personality is the dark scene in the first season. And is where he basically hustles Rupert. And I think that that's the thing, is you're going to kind of see, and I think they kind of set things up with Nate with the whole, like the Legos, and how Ted like moved him to the back, and then his son's like, why is Nate not with you guys? And he moves him to the back. And I think that, like you said, maybe the expectation was to be a little bit more cutthroat. But I think as the season goes along, Nate is going to realize that he is pretending to be something he's not. And by the end of the season, he's probably going to get fired towards the end of the season and then wind up back with Richmond. And Ted's going to be the bigger man and welcome him back. And all the players are, no, all the things you said about you. And there's going to be life lessons, obviously. But I think that, and maybe this is how it ends, is Nate comes back and takes over Richmond so Ted can go home.
That's what I was going to say, friend. That was like my prediction, is that, Nate comes back and takes over Richmond.
Yeah, but I think that they both have to.
There's some demons to get out. Demons don't have to be the worst thing in the world. They just have to be something that you need to get out.
Right. Well, I think it's imposter syndrome. And Nate's going to realize, like, this is not who I am. I don't want to be this person anymore. And I want to be who I was. And Ted is going to realize, I have, bear and grit for so long that I just want to be selfish for once. Nate's being selfish and he's not that guy. And Ted is being the guy who is so overly generous and so overly giving and, charming and whatever. And he's going to make the decision to be selfish, which is the decision he needs to make.
Right.
I didn't think we'd get so meta with this.
No, I mean, I'm glad you said that. I thought about imposter syndrome a little bit when I was watching this. It's because I was reading a blog, honestly, about imposter syndrome. I really like that. I mean, I feel like at some point, most of us feel a little bit of that, depending on what we're doing in life. And I think it's really cool that I hate a lot of, and you and I have said this a lot, we hate a lot of the W word things. I think imposter syndrome is one of the few things in that category that is actually really fitting, where, like, am I actually, like, I think I may be, like, a test case for it. And it made me think of that, where it's just like, holy shit, like, am I, like, doing what I should be doing? And it's like, do you want to be more of a Ted, or do you want to be a Nate? Do you want to be a Ted where you embrace it? And you're like, you know what? I'm not cut out for this, but screw it. I'm going to make the best of it. Or do you want to be a Nate where, like, I'm not cut out for this and I'm just going to, like, fake it?
Yeah, fake it to make it.
And that's fake it to make it. And I think that's a thing that, like, I think this would, to bring it back to, like, the outer scape of this show is, I think what this show's really about is, like, it makes you think about yourself as a person more than a lot of other shows have recently. I think a lot of shows, most of the time, are like, they make you think about the show and not about yourself.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of things about this episode, about being lazy, and I think people didn't look at it correctly. And so I started thinking that we have a lot of imposters out there writing about this show where they don't want to look at themselves in a different light. It's okay to feel like an imposter. It actually is, like, perfectly fine and everything. It's how you react to it is the actual idea of it. And for this show to take both sides of it, I love it. I mean, like, this is why I love this show so much, is it makes you think differently. Everyone's like, oh, it's such a cute and cuddly show, but it makes you think about your life. It makes you think about yourself way more than any other show in recent memory to me. Because, you know, if we're watching a sci-fi show, we think about all those things that are happening, or, you know, even The Last of Us is like moral decisions that are unlikely to happen, stuff like that. But this show is a show where it's like, yes, it's unlikely that these positions would be held, but it's that person that gets a job better than you and you still have your old position, and they're kind of, and that's happened. I think a lot of us have been through that. And I just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say that you and I watch more television than most people. I mean, based on what we do for what we have to do. And there's obviously podcasts out there that just purely do this, but for what we have to do. And I think this show makes me reflect more than any show that I watch, because it really does make you think about how you look at your life. And I think that's the intent. I really do think that's the intent. So I'm excited. I mean, if it's the last season, that's great. I mean, good for them. They did what they were supposed to do. And if it's not, good. I mean, because I think this show has a lot of talented people behind it. Even if Jason Sudeikis isn't in it, I think there's a lot of other talented people behind it that can make it work. But
hard to have a show called Ted Lasso without Ted.
Well, what I should say is, like, he may not be the focus of the show. It would be the thing. But no, I think this show is, of the 3 shows we reviewed this week, this was the show I enjoyed the most. I really think that. I really do. Yeah.
I would say that it was I enjoyed this second most. I mean, I enjoyed it more than the Mandalorian.
I like it more than The Last of Us. I honestly did really like this episode more than The Last of Us. I'm not saying it was like it was a 10 and that was a 6 or anything. I thought this show was a more representation of what this show is compared to what The Last of Us had been up to that point. And so that's why I liked it more. But I'm not, there's no right or wrong. You know?
Right. And that's, I don't agree with you, but that is your prerogative.
That's my opinion, man.
Yeah. It's poopy. So
Poopy.
So poopy. That's the only...
I do love, I will say, just like, if we're cutting into little things, there are little things I really like. The eyelash makeup, I think was really funny. I thought that was really funny. And the sewer scene was incredible.
Not
Really good stuff.
for me.
No, well, we can never have enough.
Right. Yeah.
He's fantastic.
Is that Roy Kent? Fuck off.
So, fuck off. He's so good. So good.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, man, when he went on Sesame Street and was with Oscar the Grouch, and he's like, Oscar's like, oh, this word starts with F. Oh, I love that word.
He's so good.
Or something.
Yeah. He's so funny. He writes a lot of stuff. That's one of those things, too. Like, if you watch a show, look for his name. He writes so many things. He's constantly going. And not just comedy. He, like, kind of goes everywhere. He's a good writer.
He's an interesting cat. Anyway, so yeah, Ted Lasso, there's some, like, the thing about the show is, yes, there is like a meta level to it, but it's also just going to deliver with like the standard beats of a sitcom. It's going to make you laugh. You're just going to teach life lessons, but
I would say this show is a good representation of like poetry, where you can look at poetry literally, and then you can look at poetry metaphorically, and you're right either way. You can look at the base layer of this show, and that's okay, and then you can dig really deep into it, and that's also fun. Not all shows are good at doing both. A lot of shows are good at doing one or the other, but this show does really well at doing both.